The chief of the USGA just spoke, and what he said about this year's US Open should concern every single player in the field. Because the last time those words were spoken about this course in this exact tone with this exact level of confidence, the USGA ended the week issuing a public apology. That was 2004, this is 2026. And the man running this tournament just made a promise Shinnecock Hills has broken before. A world number one chasing history on his 30th birthday. A former champion ranked 255th publicly declaring he will win. A locker room in open war with the organization about to hand out the trophy. And a golf course with a documented on-record history of breaking the sport. Here is the full story. Jeff Hall is the USGA's Managing Director of Rules and Open Championships. He controls how this course is set. He decides where the pins go, how fast the greens run, how narrow the fairways play in the wind. This week he spoke publicly about what the USGA is planning for Shinnecock Hills in 2026. His message was precise. The course will be firm, it will be fast. And the green complexes, Hall confirmed directly, will represent the greatest challenge on the entire property. What Hall is actually communicating, in the careful language of a governing body that has been burned here before, is this. We are taking this course to the absolute limit of what is playable. We will not cross it. That is not a description, that is a promise. And Shinnecock Hills has a documented history of breaking exactly this kind of promise. The 126th US Open runs June 18th through 21st. The course plays at 7,434 yards. Par 70. Those numbers carry almost no information at Shinnecock. Par here is not a target, it is a rumor spread by the scorecard. The real negotiation is between the golfer, the Atlantic wind, and green complexes that have, in living memory, turned a professional golf tournament into something closer to a public humiliation. Shinnecock Hills Golf Club in Southampton, New York does not behave like other golf courses. It behaves like a verdict. Founded in 1891, host of the second US Open ever played in 1896. 5 championships across 3 different centuries, a distinction no other venue in American golf holds. And every single time it has returned to the schedule, it has left something behind. Not a memory, a scar. The scar that matters most is 2004. The USGA set the course at the absolute outer edge of what physics allows on a golf course, putting surfaces turned to glass. Players watched balls roll off greens they hadn't touched. Chips from off the collar accelerated across putting surfaces and kept going. Phil Mickelson addressed a moving ball on the 13th green, took a 2-shot penalty, and walked off that hole with a 10. Retief Goosen won the championship at 4 over par. After the final round, the USGA did something it almost never does. It apologized. Not privately, publicly. A formal acknowledgement that the setup had crossed a line, the most significant admission of institutional error in the organization's modern history. Jeff Hall knows that apology by heart. It will be in the room with him every time he makes a decision about this course between now and Sunday. The question is whether knowing it is enough to avoid repeating it. In 2018, Brooks Koepka returned to Shinnecock and made it entirely his own. He won his second consecutive US Open title with a score of 1 over par in conditions the field described as unfair. Koepka described them as exactly the kind of test he was built for. The third round that year produced scoring averages above 75. The gap between those two descriptions, unfair versus perfectly calibrated, is where this year's championship will be decided. Scottie Scheffler is the story of this tournament whether he wins or finishes 20th. World number 1, 5 major championships. The player who has redefined what dominance looks like in this sport over the last 3 years. And the only major he does not have is this one. When Scheffler walked Shinnecock Hills for the first time in early June, having never played the course before, he came back with one specific observation. Not the fairways, which surprised him with their width. Not the yardage. The green complexes, his exact read, they would decide the championship. Scheffler is not a player who speaks for the sake of speaking. When the world number 1 identifies the decisive element on a course he has seen exactly once, the rest of the field adjusts its preparation accordingly, which makes Jeff Hall's confirmation about the greens something more than a course setup briefing. It is a direct answer to the question the best player in the world just asked about this golf course. But Scheffler's story this week is more complicated than a title chase. He has spent the last year in open friction with the governing bodies that run major championship golf, calling out rulings he considers unfair, pin placements that eliminate skill differentiation, setups that turn precision into lottery. A man who believes governing bodies consistently get it wrong is walking into the hardest tests those governing bodies produce, on a property where they once got it catastrophically wrong. His principles and his ambition are about to collide at full speed. That collision will be one of the defining storylines of the week. Rory McIlroy arrives carrying something most elite athletes never get to experience: completion. He finished his career Grand Slam at the 2025 Masters, ending an 11-year pursuit that had at times nearly consumed him. He comes to Shinnecock as a 6-time major champion with nothing left to prove, and a game he has described as being in the best shape of his career. His lone U.S. Open title came at Congressional in 2011, 8 shots clear of the field, one of the most dominant major performances the sport has produced in a generation. Freedom is a dangerous thing to hand a player of his caliber. When there is no narrative left to chase, when the pressure of an incomplete story finally lifts, what often emerges is something more dangerous than hunger: pure golf. Wyndham Clark closed the Byron Nelson in May with a Sunday 63, 3 shots clear of the field. The kind of round that tells you a player has found something real. His U.S. Open title at Los Angeles Country Club in 2023 proved he can handle this specific examination, not just the difficulty, but the patience a USGA setup demands. The bounce back from his 2025 Oakmont collapse gives him the kind of pressure-forged backstory that historically fuels major performances. He is the hottest player in this field on pure recent form. Brooks Koepka won at Shinnecock Hills in 2018. He described the conditions that week as exactly the kind of test he was built for, and he walked every brutal hour of it to prove the point. He comes back to this course ranked 255th in the world after returning from LIV Golf in January. His ranking has collapsed, his recent form has been inconsistent, and ahead of this week he made a public declaration. He believes he is going to win. From anyone else at 255th in the world, that statement would be laughable. From the man who defended the U.S. Open title on this specific course, it is something the rest of the field will dismiss at its own considerable risk. Quick pause before we go further. Jeff Hall has said the USGA is taking Shinnecock to the absolute limit of what is playable without crossing into chaos. Given what this course did in 2004, if you believe they get it right this year, type "trust the setup" in the comments. If you think by Saturday it turns into 2004 again, type "here we go again." I read every single one. And I want to know exactly where this audience stands. Here is the layer of this US Open that has no real precedent in the modern era of the sport. The players walking into Shinnecock this week are not simply competing in a golf tournament. They are competing in a tournament hosted by an institution many of them are publicly, explicitly at war with. The USGA is the same governing body that designed and mandated the golf ball rollback, the rule requiring professionals to use a shorter ball beginning in 2028. That decision has split the locker room more completely than any rule change in recent memory. Justin Thomas called the USGA selfish and said the rollback was bad for the game. Full stop. Bryson DeChambeau called it the most atrocious decision in the history of the sport. Rory McIlroy publicly defended it, arguing it put golf back on a path of sustainability. 3 of the biggest names in this field. 3 completely different positions on the same decision. One governing body hosting all of them. This tension does not disappear when the first ball launches on Thursday. It shows up in every ruling, every pin placement, every interaction between player and official. It will shape how the field responds when conditions get severe, whether they hold composure or become the story themselves. This is not just a golf tournament, it is a confrontation dressed as one. Scottie Scheffler needs one major. If he wins at Shinnecock Hills this week, he becomes the 7th player in the history of the sport to hold all 4 major titles simultaneously. The 6 men who share that distinction are Hogan, Player, Nicklaus, Woods, and McIlroy. He would be joining the shortest list in golf. The final round of this championship falls on June 21st, his 30th birthday, a 30-year-old player at the peak of his powers, the hardest course in American golf, the one title that completes his story, on the exact day he turns 30. If sport is looking for a script this week, it has already written one: Koepka's declaration, ranked 255th, returning to the site of his greatest achievement, telling the world he is going to win again. That is either the most delusional statement made before a major in years, or it is a man who knows something about himself that no ranking system can measure. McIlroy unburdened. The Grand Slam is complete. The decade-long pressure is gone. What Rory McIlroy looks like when he has nothing left to prove may be the most dangerous version of him since Congressional in 2011. Clark on form. A Sunday 63 in May. A player who runs hot and cold suddenly running very hot at exactly the right moment. The timing is not subtle. Hall's promise and the course's answer. The USGA chief has made his statement. By Saturday afternoon, Shinnecock Hills will deliver its verdict on whether that statement was kept or whether 2026 joins 2004 in the organization's record of public apologies. Jeff Hall has made his statement. The players have made theirs. Shinnecock Hills has been listening, and it has never once cared what anyone promised about it. This golf course does not produce quiet weeks. It never has. Not in 1896, not in 2004, not in 2018. This year, with more history on the line, more tension in the locker room, and a governing body that just went on record about what it intends to do to this field, it is not about to start. Shinnecock Hills does not break promises. It exposes them. If this sharpened your anticipation for Thursday, hit the like before you scroll. 1 second from you tells the algorithm this story is worth pushing to every golf fan tracking this week. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The tournament hasn't started yet, and the biggest moment of this week is still coming.